Right, good morning, everyone. This presentation is around the value and experiences of blended practice based learning. And this is a summary or a first round of sort of thoughts of the perspectives from the learners and the educators. So I'm Helen Orton and I'm co presenting with Vikki Barnes Brown, and we are a team. I know that Chris is in the group here, but we've also got Joe Sharp, Amanda Deaves, and Denise Prescott as part of the team. So the first thing I want to sort of raise here is really a little bit of background on placement models. So models of placements have traditionally utilised that have been traditionally utilised rather within health science programs is where the learners are situated within the clinical environment on a full-time basis. But we are having to reconsider placement models, and hence we have this idea of a blended practice placement where the learner spends half of their placement time in the clinical environment and the other half undertaking project work. So, the rationale for the research, as we can see here, is that we all know that practice based learning via clinical placement is absolutely pivotal to the education of healthcare learners. And clearly, working within a clinical environment facilitates authentic learning experiences, and that helps to bridge that theory and practice gap. I think we're all very much aware that healthcare is changing. We're always sort of, it's a very, healthcare and education is a very dynamic sort of environment. And some of the most recent publications have been around the idea of bringing healthcare provision closer to home. And this was in the NHS long term plan of 2019, and more recently in the People Plan of 2020. And what has actually become evident from these papers is that there's actually an increase or a need for an increase in allied health professionals. And it's quite an interesting shift because we often hear about the need to increase nurses and medics, but we don't often hear about this other huge group of healthcare professionals. The other reason that we need to research this is because there is a massive shortage of placements, and it's not something that's just happened recently. It's been an ongoing problem for probably the best part of 2 decades, but it's got to quite a sort of a point at which we really need to address it because things are, I suppose, if you for want of another word, collapsing around us. So we had last year from Health Education England a directive to for expanding the clinical programs. So obviously that was meaning that we would take on more students, and that would then require more placements. We also have issues around the cancellation of placements. That might be due to staff shortages, illness, and obviously more recently, the impact of COVID has had taken a huge hit as far as placements are concerned. And educators have also been shielding. So this really forced the placement practice teams, particularly in physiotherapy and occupational therapy, to really start to reflect and revise and reimagine placements really rather urgently. So the idea of the placements was actually instigated much earlier on in the year. So we've already gone through some of these placements. So I'm just going to talk about the aim, and we're going to move on to some of the results, the initial results. So the aim of the research is really very much about ascertaining the experiences of newly introduced blended placement based learning for second year occupational therapy and physiotherapy learners and their educators. It's a mixed method study, and the first part of the study is um, administering online questionnaires to the learners. So we've had 53 students or learners who have been out on blended placements, and we had a response rate of 51% from that questionnaire. And with the educators, the questionnaires have been sent out to 30 educators, and we have a response rate of 40%. Um, we decided just to then continue with the focus groups with the students or the learners. So we're just going to now listen to some clips from students about some of their perspectives. So we're going to start off with the positives.
Well, you don't pick up your sound there, actually. I don't know whether I don't know if it's worth pausing that video at that point because we can't hear the sound.
Helen, we can't hear the sound from the video.
Ah, right.
So if you go to your share, if you stop
Yeah, I'll
sharing
just stop. Yep.
screen, and when you go to share screen, you should be
Yep.
able to check a little box that says include computer sound.
Ah, sorry about that.
Alright.
That's
Right.
okay.
It might take a second just for it to install. Is that right, John? I think on a Windows.
Yeah, it might just take a second. Will, your
Include, yeah.
microphone's above your head as
Oh, is
well.
it? Oh,
Yeah.
blimey. Technical issues. But yeah,
Okay.
include computer sound. That's what
Yeah,
we.
I've done that now. So let's try and start to see whether that works. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
That's fine.
So let's go back to sharing screen. Oh, now has that actually worked?
Well, we can see the picture again.
Yeah, now let's just sorry about the technology.
That's
Um,
okay.
and fun and games, isn't it? Right. Now let's see if this works now.
Oh, I'm still not getting that sound actually. Can you hear it at your end, Helen?
I can. Can you?
No, can't hear it at
No.
our end.
No.
Ah,
So I wonder, but you
right.
toggled that switch, didn't you?
Yeah,
And
let me just pause that again. Let me just go. Right, so I toggled it. So
yeah,
I went on to, and then, right, so I've toggled it there. Right, so let's go. Let's see whether that's going to work again. It's a good job we've only got 2 presentations, isn't it? Shall I try that again?
yeah.
And I have
Oh,
also
got it that time.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Do you want to rewind it back to the
I
beginning of
will.
that video, Helen?
Yeah, I will do.
Lovely.
Thank you very much, guys, for helping to sort that out. Okay, here we go.
My name's Carl Patrick. I'm a second year physiotherapy student. So some of the benefits of doing this split placement was I was fortunate in that I was able to work closely with the band 8A, who was the lead in the department, Helen Kelso-Ashcroft. Positives of this were I was able to gain experience of devising, undertaking, and presenting this project in the poster.
Hi, I'm Charmaine. I'm a second year physiotherapy student. Overall, it has been a rewarding experience as I believe completing a clinical audit would be a CV boosting skills, which is required as a band 5 physiotherapist. And I have also completed a piece of work as an evidence to build onto my CPD profile.
Hello everyone, I'm Jackson. I'm a physiotherapy student from University of Liverpool. The good thing about the split placement is actually you will gain more information academically in terms of how the ward is functioning and what they are currently doing in their routines, which you can't learn this from textbooks or online videos because we are focusing on topic that is based on the clinical side, which is very valuable and it's very unique for students.
Hi, my name's Laura. I'm a second year physio student and I took part in the blended learning placement on it. So benefits that I found was I felt more refreshed going into the clinical days because it was less intense than what I would imagine a 4-day week would be.
Okay, and now we're going to
My name's Carl Patrick.
do apologise. So this should be moving on to some.
The kind of challenge with this was
Don't know why that's not working. Sorry. Let's try and get these challenges up. Here we go. Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep. Here we
kind
go.
of challenge with this was the loss of exposure to clinical hours. So especially working within an acute setting, the cases are a lot more varied and therefore there's kind of less repetition. So if you are not there for those individual circumstances, then you're not likely going to have those opportunities again.
Some of the challenges that I've encountered would be the shortened the amount of time that I was able to spend with patients, that I was able to see with patients, since I am just coming in 2 to 3 days per week.
Actually reduces students' time in doing practical hands-on stuff, which is the original idea of doing a placement, which is different from the first half of the whole physiotherapy program, which is academic. A project which is presented in presentation with some live audiences, while others are getting a split placement project only presented in a Word document.
However, I was quite unsettled by continually having to catch up with what was happening on the ward, such as the patient's discharges or changes in health conditions, which I would have missed. I struggled to build a rapport with the patients because I was seeing, my educators wanted me to see as many presentations of a stroke as possible and see the ways that I could have handled that, but I didn't really get a chance to practice that. Also, I didn't feel like I progressed as much, especially in my confidence with my clinical skills compared to other people who were on a full placement.
So thank you to all those students that very kindly have agreed to do some video clips. I'm now going to pass over to Vikki, who's going to talk about the practice educator feedback.
Okay, so we asked some of our practice educators across physiotherapy and occupational therapy for their feedback on the benefits and challenges of this blended type of learning placement. So some of the things that were, really came out of this was having one less person physically in the department. So this is particularly relevant during the global pandemic, in which social distancing guidelines have meant that there's got to be limited numbers of staff within departments. So it's meant there was only one physical student in the department 2.5 days a week, and then they were obviously working remotely for the other time. One of the occupational therapy learners, one of her projects was to research outcome measures for a patient population in respiratory and a surgical ward, and then pilot those outcome measures with those service users. So one of the real benefits was that, this is something that's been on an educator's performance development review, objective for a good long while now. But the students been able to, do this research, and then this outcome measure is now being used across those surgical and respiratory wards. The other things that the benefits was about students demonstrating, time management and organisational skills, because when they were away from the department or working remotely, they had to manage their own time to ensure that the project was completed in a timely manner. So it challenged the learner outside of the bounds of the working environment. So certainly what the educators noticed was that the students were actually, yes, they might have reduced some clinical skills and clinical time, but they were developing project management skills, they were developing their communication skills when they were feeding back to the team, and research skills for some students depending on the types of projects. One of the educators as well thought it was less resource intensive in the fact that, you only physically had a student there 2.5 days a week with you. So they could actually maintain their own caseloads rather than having a student. For physio, it would be 4 days full time, and for occupational therapy, 5 days full time. Okay, next slide, Helen, please. Some of the challenges were that supervision took longer. So students receive formal documented supervision once per week with their practice educators. So the supervision actually took longer because the educator was not just focusing on the students' clinical skills, they were also focusing on their project management skills as well. One of the educators mentioned about, there are potential issues. If you've got a proactive student, then, they can manage their time well, manage their project well. However, if the student's less proactive and less productive, then they may need more support in order to manage their time and manage that project. Within occupational therapy, we've used these types of placements on a bit of an ad hoc basis to try and prevent placement cancellations. But in physiotherapy, larger cohorts have gone out. So it's just making sure that the service improvement project that the students are doing is big enough and actually contributes to service improvement. So we don't want them doing a project for the sake of doing a project. We want them doing a project that's going to contribute to the service improvements of those clinical departments and will actually be used. I think, similar to what the students were saying with regard to their clinical hours, the educators reported that as well, is that they felt that the students missed out. If they were on a 10-week placement, then clinically they missed out on a lot of time. So, for some learners, this may be particularly difficult in them sort of getting to grips with clinical skills and developing their own clinical and professional reasoning. Okay, Helen, next slide, please. So what next? So as Helen mentioned earlier, we have sent out initial questionnaires to our learners and to our educators, and we've completed focus groups with our physiotherapy learners and occupational therapy learners. We're just completing some more focus groups at the minute, and then we will plan to obviously write this up in more detail. So this is just a snapshot so far of where we're up to. But some of the things that have come out so far is us being able to manage the learners' expectations. So, promoting development of team skills, promoting how they manage their own time on placement, and how they manage and develop their project skills. Then also managing the educators' expectations. Traditionally, both in occupational therapy and physiotherapy, we've had more or less a one-to-one model with one educator and one student out on placement. And this has been quite set and quite a fixed model, but COVID has allowed us to adapt placements and trial out different models. So we still need to manage those educators' expectations, so that we can prevent placement cancellations, but also ensure that both the educators and the learners feel that the student is still exposed to those clinical skills. So it's educating the placement educators really on the value of these new placement models that are available. Also educating, the learners and educators, looking at their perspectives, looking at the scope and value of the projects that they're actually producing, and making sure that we communicate with both of them really. So actually marketing this project and the skills that the student is likely to achieve, but also for the services, how these can be used and developed in practice to promote service improvement. So our plan is to develop handbooks for educators and learners for any future cohorts of students that are due to go out on this type of placement. Okay, next slide. So thank you for listening. Any questions?
And those are just the references. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was great. Really interesting. Yeah. Is there any questions from the floor? If you'd like to kick off.
I have a question actually. I just wondered, because obviously you've done this under difficult circumstances. Is there any elements of it that you think you would keep going forward, or are you completely going to go back to what you did before?
No, definitely not, Simon. I think COVID, we've got increase in student numbers across all of our health science programs. So placement capacity issues are here to stay. So COVID has sort of pushed us forward in trialing different placement models, but they're definitely here to stay. So we've got a range of different placement models on offer. This is just one of them. So this is like the blended or split placement model. We've got 4 physiotherapy students doing a leadership placement at the moment within the School of Health Sciences. And students across the country are doing research placements now, and then we've also got some students who had been shielding on virtual placements.
Yeah.
So due to the technology that's now available within the NHS and social care, we've had students being able to work from home but still getting clinical exposure via Attend Anywhere software and things like that. So they're still getting patient contact, but they don't have to be physically there with the patient. The other thing that's coming on board as well is text placements, so technology enhanced care services. So some of our orthoptic students will be exposed to HoloLens, where the educator can wear, the glasses, and then it can be almost like live streamed, the intervention to the student, so they don't have to be on site at the time.
Sounds good, yeah.
My ears pricked up with HoloLens then. I'll be able to play with one of those.
I mean, it's obvious that the students felt that it was an enhancement to their own CVs, that the fact they were involved with this project and they saw the value in that.
Yeah.
Did they feel like they had enough chance to get together with fellow students to discuss what they were doing and how they were finding it through this project?
So I think with the physiotherapy students, it was quite different to the occupational therapy students. So they had weekly drop-in sessions because it was a cohort of students who did the blended placement for physiotherapy. They had weekly drop-in sessions with a tutor
scheduled in,
and could meet up with other students doing projects. But what we found is there was a massive range of projects. And some of them, with the occupational therapy ones, Chris will tell you, I'm a bit of a control freak. So I met with the educators first and made sure that the project was big enough and that the student, and the educator would be getting something out of it.
Right.
So some of the physiotherapy ones were sort of smaller and, students could have done them in, a shorter amount of time. So that requires management going forward.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think a lot of this was down to experience as well, wasn't it, though, Vikki? And some of these placements, I think we have to recognise, were needed to be put into place literally 2 days before the start. So, the students were starting on a Monday and they were being notified of a change or a different type of placement on the Friday. And this is not an uncommon sort of happening, really. In placement provision, just because we can't control what actually goes out in real life. So it is a good alternative, and there are clearly some positives, and I think we have to build on those but address those challenges. And as we've said, it is about managing those expectations all round, and we'll get that right. We're working on that.
We've learned a lot from the first phase, haven't we? And, tweaks are being made all the time to, for the learners, but also for the educators to understand the value of this type of placement too.
And that, sorry, Vikki, that was actually evident. We've just got the transcript from the second physiotherapy focus group. And, that is nowhere near as negative as the first one. So things are certainly already starting to improve because everyone's learned from the first round. There was no time to prepare. That's why it was just so quick. It was, what are we going to do? We can't not offer the students placement.
Yeah.
That was the solution.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's a phoenix, as you might say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So actually, our second set of presenters haven't turned up, so we've got loads of time to drill you on this now. And I find the conversation fascinating. But one of the things that I'd like to know about is your assessment methods, and you mentioned assessment methods, and how have they adapted based on the blended approach that you've had to take?
I'm going to pass that over to the expert.
So the occupational therapy students and physiotherapy students are assessed on a common assessment document. So it's used across, the OT one's used across 4 Northwest universities, and the physiotherapy one is used again across Northwest universities. So there's 10 different performance dimensions that they have to meet, and they're assessed based on that. So within occupational therapy, we met with the educators and the learners and made sure that what they were actually doing fit into that performance criteria that the educator was assessing. And again, for physiotherapy, then again, our colleague Amanda has been doing that with the learners and also with the educators as well. But I think going forward, we still need, to provide more information about that.
Great.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you very much. That was
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So you're presenting it in Prague next week, did you say, Helen?
No,
Vikki, sorry, Vikki?
Oh no, I'm presenting in Prague in September, but not on
In
this.
September. No, different project.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Virtual authentic practice-based assessments, VAPA.
Oh, good. Cool.
Oh, lovely.
Fantastic. Okay, well, should we stop the recording here then, John, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's all right.
Finally, do you think
Simon.
could this be applied in any context, you think? Because obviously placements is something that we really want to encourage. Interestingly, one of the things we're doing with the curriculum framework is adding in teaching modes, and one of those is called in-person off campus and remote off. So this kind of links into that. Do you think it's applicable across other disciplines?
Definitely, definitely. So, we have 6 healthcare programs within the School of Health Sciences. So it can be applied across any of those, the 5 allied health professional programs and the nursing program. But certainly across medicine or whatever, it's got wider potential.
I would also say across industry. So if you're thinking about engineering or anything else, it's got a lot of mileage. It really has, and something that I think we'll start to see a lot of in future.
That's great. Thank you very much.
It's really cool.